Joining us live now is the Executive Chairman of Yellow Brick Road Home Loans, Mark Bouris, as he does on a Friday. Mark, good to see you. How are things?
How are you going, mate?
Yeah, going
very
well.
Good. I actually feel up.
Yeah. Well, you get that feeling, don't you? Know, we're not far away from Monday now, and just we've been in this lockdown for just about 4 months, and there is a lift that things are going to open up and life returns to normal, some kind of normal anyway.
That seems to be the way it is. I'm getting the vibe, like I'm in the city here, and everyone talks about how the main part of the CBD in Sydney is not so good. But actually, in the last 3 or 4 days, this week, I felt a big vibe here, and there's a lot more traffic. It just seems to be a lot more people around the joint. So my gut feeling is we're going to come back with a wet sail. That's how I feel, a wet sail, real hard.
I hope we do too. Now, we've got the new Premier in the mix as well, and he's already brought forward some easing of restrictions. What do you make of them? What do you make of the changes that he's made so far?
Well, one of the things I really do like is the elected officials now standing in front of us, and we're not being spoken to by the unelected officials. I really like that, and I know it's sort of upset some people, but from my personal point of view, I like that. That's the first thing. The second thing is he's an economist, and that he understands the economic impacts or effects of all this. And what I think we're hearing him saying is we're about to weigh up the mental health problems, the physical health problems, as well as the economic problems. Look, we've got more than 2 million people unemployed in this country right now. So it's now time. We've got this under control, sort of. It's now time we get control of the unemployment numbers, the poor economic performance of this country, and in particular this city and this state. Yeah,
no, I got to agree with your point you made there, Mark. You take the health advice. The job of the boss is to take the health advice, but you can't be, that can't dictate everything. You've got to balance that up with your economic factors and all your other factors as well. Now, if he can do one thing that might help business confidence even more, what do you suggest that could be?
I think he's got to put out a new roadmap that makes it absolutely crystal clear to consumers and to business owners that businesses will rise up from the ashes and that businesses will be looked after. And in other words, that the small business community, the business community generally speaking, will be getting a seat at the table by virtue of how he looks at it. And I've been saying for a long time, the business community has not had a seat at the table in relation to all the rules and regulations and lockdowns, etc. So make it clear. All we need is clarity that the business community are going to get a seat at the table and that they are going to be considered as equals when it comes to the health crisis. And I think he's starting to say that, although he has been getting belted left, right and centre by a lot of the commentary. But look, let's see how tough he is. I mean, if he's tough enough, we'll be sweet.
Let's go into these changes when it comes to getting a home loan that were triggered by APRA this week, Mark. They're going to increase the interest rate buffer by just 0.5%. How much do you think this will shift the dial when it comes to housing affordability?
Well, I can tell you straight up, at assessing a borrower with a 3% buffer, in other words, at 5% or more than 5%, basically reduces the amount of money an average borrower can borrow by about 5%. So if a borrower could previously borrow $500,000, now they can only borrow $475,000. What that means is that the buyer, has less money to spend at auction or when they go to buy. The only thing I'm worried about, there will be a little bit of a skew in terms of prejudice against people who don't have big incomes. So the people who are not worried about how much money they earn, they earn heaps of money, they'll still be able to borrow the same amount of money. But look, it's a skew. I'm not worried about that because those individuals only represent a small percentage of buyers in the marketplace anyway. What we're talking about here is bringing back the amount of money you've got in your pocket, available to spend at auction or buying in by private treaty, which should allow us to control the house price purchase value.
So how much more? How much more weapons can the government or APRA use to address housing affordability, which, looking at the figures now, it's going to be another 20% rise in the next 12 months?
Well, that's precisely what they're trying to attack, Peter. So they're saying if house prices raise by 7 or 8%, that's sort of a sustainable. 20% is no good. So if we can sort of peel back 5%, that's a big deal. I guess on top of that, the regulator can probably come back and start to say to the lenders, look, we don't want you to lend as much to investors. So, start to reduce the amount of money you lend to investors. They've done this before. They did in 2015. You and I have been talking about this for the last 3 weeks.
Yep.
On top of that, the big banks, someone like Commonwealth Bank's not going to assess you at 5%. They're going to assess you at 5.25%. So let's not forget about what individual banks are going to do as well. So what APRA said is add 3% to the interest rate you charge. So the average interest rate is not 2% at the moment. That's the fixed rate. The average interest rate in the right going around now is about 2.5%. So to be frank, we're probably going to be looking at assessments at around about 5.25 or 5.5%. So on top of what the regulator said, so that's going to make it even tougher. So if at 5% it's there's going to be a 5% reduction in the amount of money you can borrow, at 5.25 there's going to be proportionally more or proportionally less that you can borrow, and at 5.5% is going to be even proportionally less again. So my gut feeling is overall this process, let's see how it goes. We've got to give it to Christmas at least.
Yep.
You're going to see a lot less money flushing around the system. Therefore, purchase prices should come down. But in the long term, what has this done in the long term to Australian house prices over the last 25 years? It's done bugger all, nothing. Because over time, everything adjusts and people start to borrow more again and house prices still go up, because at the end of the day, it's about supply and demand.
Yeah.
And right now, there is not enough supply to meet the demand.